yeah, thankful for that. I do want to mention if there's kids here, I think I saw some children. I want to remind you, parents, bring them by the table. I have some little candy airplanes they can put together. And you adults can have them too, okay? It's made up of gum and Smarties, and everyone likes those. But yeah, it is a thrill to be here. I am not an aviator. I don't fly airplanes. I don't work on them. I don't fly helicopters. I am one of our national representatives for Ethnos 360, formerly New Tribes Mission. And I am a recruiter. Pastor was saying about, looking for individuals that can come serve with us. And it's been exciting to be involved in our role. A number of years ago, I was at an event similar to this, much smaller, and a gentleman came to my table and we spoke, and he was getting out of the Air Force in 2 weeks. And the whole reason he went in the Air Force was so that he could get training and serve in missions. And I said to him, "What did you do in the Air Force?" And he said, "Well, for 18 of my 20 years, I took care of the maintenance on Air Force One." So he's taking care of our airplanes right now. Yeah, very encouraging. But I want to talk a little bit about engaging on the edge. This is going to be a very different service for you. I'm not going to be preaching at you today, but I want to bring a focus of vision to help you understand what it takes to plant churches among unreached people, what it takes to bring the gospel to them, and how aviation fits into that. I call it engaging beyond the edge. We sort of have our boundaries as a church, but as you folks have reached out across the nations through those that you are involved with and support, you have multiplied yourself many times over the size of this congregation. That's very exciting for me because I don't see a lot of churches in some of the regions I get into that are engaging missions to the depth that you are. I want to take you to a little video just to kind of whet your appetite of where we're going to go today. Evidently my remote. Here we go. Wonder if we need to think I need to restart it. Okay, let me see. Nope, we're not on the video. Oh, let's go back here. I'll go back one more. Now let's try it. There we go. And don't let this creep you out. Looks a little bit different than our American backyards, doesn't it? This is actually in the country of Papua New Guinea. But I'll introduce my wife and I. Let me try my remote again. Something's just not going on right here. Okay, I may need to have you advance for me. My remote doesn't seem to want to work. I love technology. So I do not look like that anymore. My wife and I have been involved in missions for a very long time. I did have hair at one time. But this is when we began in ministry back in 1977. I came to faith in Jesus in 1976 as a 22-year-old. And the pastor that we met with that evening after I had read through Romans took us into discipleship. We were discipled for 8.5 hours a week for a year and a half. He said, "You've got to share Jesus with someone immediately." I got to lead a man to Christ the very next day. I said, "Come meet me at lunchtime." I wanted to share the security of the believer with him. And he asked me another life-changing question. He said, "What's next?" And I said, "I don't know, but my wife and I are meeting with this pastor tonight for discipleship. What I learn, I will teach you." And within 2 months, we launched a ministry called Each One Reach One, Each One Teach One, as we were being discipled. And it really lit a fire for us. But a little information about ourselves, if we hit it again. Okay, we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. I can't believe we've been married that long. But we've been 48 of those years in ministry, 44 of those years serving with Ethnos 360. And those years have gone quickly. My wife said to me one evening while we were in Chicago, we were laying there because We had just completed the day of ministry, and there were some young people there, and we were talking about these 20-year-old somethings, and she said, if we were back in our 20s again, would you consider doing this journey all over again? I said, absolutely. And yeah, for us, it's been an exciting thing. I'll go to the next slide. I want to move quickly through these. I don't want to dwell on ourselves. But as a church planting organization, our intent is to plant churches among indigenous people. That is where the Bible, Christians, and churches don't exist. So we go to the really hard to reach areas of the world. Our focus as Ethnos 360 is on ethnicities. That's a Greek word that we get our word ethnicity from, languages, nations, and then 360 being global, where we minister. We'll move on quickly here. The next one just kind of shows you some of the countries that we work in. The closed access areas of the world had to do with changing our name. I was in the Himalayas some years ago doing people group assessments, and I was with a trekking guide who was a believer, Nepali, and there was also a Hindu governor with me. And that Hindu governor said to me, he said, you know, if you took mission out of your name, I could get you into our country. Well, I didn't know we were in the throes of changing our name at that time, and we work in many closed access areas of the world where we are planting churches among unreached people. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, I don't know what, maybe my batteries are shot. But if we, yeah. So my wife and I spent a third of our life in the country of Papua New Guinea serving. Papua New Guinea is about the size of California. Get this, it has 863 different languages. Just like German and Spanish and French and Hungarian and Japanese are all different from one another. Every one of those people groups are that different from one another, and they have their own culture, their own worldview. So a very, very difficult area of the world. It's located just north of Australia. The western half of that is known as Irian Jaya, which I don't have on my picture, but that island does continue to the west. And we also have people working in that area. Let's go to the next slide. This was our first location. That airfield did not exist there. For us to get into that region, I'll disclose to you in a little bit how difficult it was, but we worked among a people group called the Pawaya. Years ago when we were in Bible college, we saw a presentation, and all the guy talked about were headhunting cannibals. And during that chapel, my wife and I looked at one another, and we said out loud while he was speaking, "We will never go there." I was student council president and had actually introduced him for that chapel. We were so embarrassed. We turned red, we got up and went out. Little did we realize God would direct our steps, and the first people group we worked among were former headhunting cannibals. I'm adopted by one of our tribesmen who, up until the point when we brought the gospel there, had killed and eaten 4 people in his lifetime. So, you know, you never told the people I'd like to share my heart, okay? It just had a different meaning. But let's go to the next picture. And then we moved from that area, and we moved to an island, and we worked, you have to hit it one more time. We worked among a people group called the Loco. So we sent a newsletter out saying, we've gone loco, okay? As we know, in Spanish, loco means crazy. In their language, it meant the friendly people, although they warred and they fought among one another. So let's advance there if we can. Wish I could get this going. So this is kind of our village located just inland from the coast. Doesn't look like we were in very far, but it was very rugged height. Hiking in Papua New Guinea is very, very difficult. Let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry I had to have him call him out to do all this for me. But we had a big change the end of 1999. My wife comes from a family of individuals who had polycystic kidney disease. And we knew that when we went into training, but God gave us 16 and a half years in the country of Papua New Guinea, and then we had to return to the U.S. the end of 1999 for my wife to get a kidney transplant. At that time, she was number 8 in the family. We've had 2 more transplants recently. My daughter is one of those. And so we were mobilizers in the Mid-Atlantic in 13 states on the east, and then with our daughter being in Arizona and no mobilization effort in the Southwest, they asked if we would like to move to Arizona. We said, absolutely. We got 5 grandchildren there. You know, what could be better than that? So we are dominantly working in the Phoenix area. We have nearly 6 million people. Actually, it's 5 million. When the snowbirds come, it increases by 1 million, you know. So it's been a very interesting area to work. My wife working with Perspective, setting these courses up, open up opportunities for me to mobilize, to do mentoring with individuals that want to serve in mission. So we're really busy. We're both working somewhere around 75 to 80 hours a week in our ministries, and we love it. Lots of good connections there. So let's advance on. So that's kind of what we do. We're in mobilization. And our heart is to see God raise up laborers who will join us in going to these unreached people groups of the world that otherwise will never have an opportunity to hear the gospel. Let's go to the next one. Oh, I want to get through these so quickly. But people always ask me, are there unreached people in the world? And yes, there are many unreached people in the world. We'll look at some numbers. I want to go to a little video now. I don't know if you can up the sound for this or not, but let's go to that video. If you click one more time, it should take us into that.
Darkness. Millions of people live in it every day. People who have not heard or seen the light of the gospel. They worship gods they fear, spirits who control them. They perform rituals and sacrifices to protect them from their neighbors, to get enough food for another day, to survive illness and injury. There are millions of them, millions of men, women, and children. Tribal people all across the world, in remote, never before reached places of the earth, isolated, with no access to salvation in Jesus, living in darkness, despair, a life without hope. Thousands die every day without the opportunity to hear the gospel, to know the light and life that is Jesus Christ. Is this our responsibility? Could this be our darkness as well? Reach into the darkness. Reach to those with no opportunity to know Jesus. Expanding the reach of the gospel to every tribe, tongue, and nation.
Oh, at the camera. Okay. All right, let's point that at the camera then. There we go. How about that? Excellent. You know, every time I hear that, it says, could this be our darkness as well in understanding our responsibility to take the gospel to people? As we lived among these indigenous people, I used to look at it, it was, is their fate, is their destination really their fate, or was it our failure to come sooner? And that was a question we had to answer. We were grateful that we could work among them. Our world is changing. We have 8 billion people, more than 8 billion people in the world. There we go. Over 7,000 languages. Can you imagine that? I mean, even if we sat here today among us and each one of us said a different nation, let alone the number of languages that are in the world, it's overwhelming. It's very startling to us in missiology. So among the 7,151 languages spoken, there are somewhere around 16,300 people groups. And maybe you're wondering, how do you get that many people groups when there are less than half that amount of languages? But as you know, Spanish, there are Spanish speakers among all different nations of the world. So sometimes those languages are multiplied out as well. 16,300 people groups, and there we go. One more back, David. Now I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Okay, there's actually 6,900 people groups who are considered unreached, and then that means there's less than 2% Christian. And then if we go to the next one, I'm terrible with this. Okay, unreached. 3,250 people groups are unengaged. That means they have no Christians, no Bibles, no churches, no one to reach them at all. And that's our world. That's the world that we focus upon. We want to bring the gospel to those individuals. Okay, there's the camera. I want to show you a little video just to give you an awareness of where things are at.
Jesus told us 2,000 years ago that our mission is to go and make disciples of all nations. He also promised us that only after we accomplish that task will we receive the blessing of his return. So, how are we doing accomplishing our mission? To answer that, let's classify the 7 billion people on the earth today into 3 groups. Let's start with the Christians. About 33% of the world's population would identify itself as Christian. We call this segment of the population World C, C for Christian. It's important to remember that not all of the people that fall into World C are true believers in Christ. They merely identify themselves as Christian because of nominal belief in Jesus, or because they live in a country where everyone is considered Christian, so they would do the same. Next, there's the 38% of the world that has access to the gospel but has chosen not to follow Jesus. They have Bibles in their language, churches nearby, friends or co-workers who are potentially Christians, or access to other Christian resources in their language. These people have access to the good news, but just haven't acted on it yet. This segment of the population is called World B. That leaves us with 29% of the world, just over 1 out of every 4 people on this planet who not only have never heard of Jesus, they have no chance of hearing the good news of Jesus Christ. They have no access to the gospel, no Bibles, no churches, no believers nearby, no chance to learn about Jesus. We call that 29% World A. Now, on to missionaries. Only 1 out of every 1,800 Christians in World C decides to serve as a cross-cultural missionary. So, we can pull 400,000 missionaries out of that World C population. That's our total cross-cultural missionary force worldwide. Did you know that 72% of all our missionaries are going to World C? That's right. The vast majority of the missionaries being sent out are going to the people of the world that have Bibles and established churches. 25% of the missionaries are sent to World B, where there is already some access to the church and to the Bible. That leaves only 3% of the total missionary force to handle all of World A, the section of the population without any chance of hearing about Jesus. 29% of the world has no way to hear the gospel, but we're sending only a tiny portion of our Christian workers to them. What about finances? Annually, all those Christians in World C earn a total of $42 trillion. And, together, they give about $700 billion to Christian causes each year. That includes everything: Christian nonprofits, churches, youth programs, missions, etc. Can you do the math? Less than 2% of Christian income is being given to Christ's causes. Out of that $700 billion given to all Christian causes, only $45 billion is given to missions specifically. That's a little over 6%. In fact, there is more money reported embezzled from the church each year than is given to missions. Remember those 400,000 missionaries? We have $45 billion to support them and their cross-cultural work, but how exactly is it allocated? Well, $39 billion goes to World C every year. Yep, 87% of that missions money is being spent in areas of the world that have Bibles and churches available. $5.4 billion, or 12%, goes to World B each year, those that have access to the gospel message but have rejected it. That leaves only $450 million, or 1% of all missions money going to World A, the least reached people of the world. To put that into perspective, annually Americans spend more money on Halloween costumes for their pets than gets sent to World A. To summarize, only 3% of our missionary force, armed with only 1% of missions giving, is going out to reach the 2 billion people who don't have access to the gospel. 2 billion people are still waiting for the good news of Jesus Christ.
It's pretty startling, isn't it, when you consider that? Yeah. I want to move on from here. If I can do this. Hey, there we go. I want to talk a little bit about what does it take to reach unreached people, and I want to fit aviation into this as well so you can understand. And just to walk you through this quickly, what time do we need to wrap up? Oh, we do? Oh, great. Okay, I'm going to go quickly. So we went to the country of Papua New Guinea. This compound that you're looking at is at 5,000 feet elevation, and it's on a 16% incline. That is our main headquarters station in the country of Papua New Guinea. So we did not go out as support role workers. We went out as church planters, and we wanted to, okay, get that baby. We wanted to go beyond there. We wanted to go out into the remote areas to be able to find a people group that we could engage with. And remember, 863 different people groups in that little country. So what we did, this is flying over the jungle. We flew back and forth in the airplane. Our pilot took us for 5 straight days looking to see if we could see smoke rising up through the jungle floor. That is a tropical rainforest. Unless there is a trail, you don't walk through it. And if there is not a trail, you have to cut it. So back and forth looking, and we finally saw smoke coming up through the jungle floor, and there was a small hamlet. There's no way you could land an airplane there. If we would have had a helicopter, We probably could have sat down in there, but we'd have blown the roofs off of those grass huts that they live in. So we began to map out their location from the instrument readings in the airplane, and 2 months later, myself and 2 other men, we set out on foot, and, getting there. Okay, you see that valley there? That's got one of the world's most treacherous rivers in it. It's called the Wagi. And those mountains that look like velvet are covered in 6 to 10 foot razor grass. Guess what razor grass does to you? It cuts you, okay? So everything covered. Even we had hats on with mosquito netting just to protect our faces. And the first day, let's see if I can get this going. Okay, we got that far the first day. Okay, we had driven as far as we could into the mountains in 4-wheel drive. The road ended, we got out and we began hiking. We made it that far the first day. So I think I have to actually look at it too. Second day, we made it that far. You just cannot believe the rugged terrain. Third day, fourth day. There we go. Come on, fourth day. Fourth day, we made it that far. That's hiking 11 hours a day. I tell young people that love to hike, I could make you despise hiking, okay? And it's really interesting. So, okay, come on. I'll coax it there. So here we are, and we come to this pass. We later went back through there with an altimeter, and we found out that we had scaled a cliff wall that was 2,300 feet high, okay? Fortunately, there's enough jungle foliage on that cliff wall that you can pick your way down. Very treacherous, crossed rivers. We later learned if you're going to do a crossing on a trail, you go upriver a quarter to a half a mile and you cross there. We made the mistake of trying to cross where the trail came and we could see it on the other side. We got swept a half mile down river and had to cut trail to get back up to where we were. So very rugged. So we were going somewhere out beyond there, 3 more days walking, and our first contact, I'm sorry, my slides are created for like a big screen TV, so that's why they're off here. But we came in on a lower shelf of land, and by a waterfall, we saw this group of naked warriors with bows and arrows. And it's like, wow, what do we do? They've got weapons. And do we approach them or what? So we decided we're probably far enough out of range they can't pick us off with their bow and arrows. So we made a bunch of noise to see what their response would be. And when we did that, they dropped their weapons and they dove into the pool of water. Except for one little old man, he walked right up to us and he spoke to us in the trade language. We did not know the tribal language, but we knew the trade language. And we asked him, how did you know the trade language, you know, living so isolated? And he said when he was a little boy, he ran away. Took him like 6 days, and he got down to the coast, and no food, and some Australians found him. He was unconscious, and they raised him. And he learned the trade language. So we felt God placed him there as a means of communication for us. And we said, why did those other guys dive into the pool of water? Well, he coaxed them out, and they were shivering. But we found out they weren't shivering because they were cold. They were actually convulsing because they were scared of us. You see, they never saw this color skin before. And in their animistic world, they thought we were spirits of dead ancestors come back to life. So they were fearful of us. So we began drawing them out in question about we wanted to find out what their worldview was. And we thought the best way to find that is ask them, what do they do when they awaken in the morning? And they said they're hungry and they want something to eat. We inquired, what do you eat? They said, we roast sweet potatoes. Where did you get them? Oh, we get them from our jungle gardens. Our wives grow them. And they told us the process of digging them out. And the woman has a digging stick, and as she digs for that sweet potato, she chants to the spirit of the stick. How about that? She chants to the spirit of the sweet potato. Then, when they build a fire, they're putting down the tinder. They chant to the spirit of the tinder. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why do you do all this chanting? Why do you do all this placating? And they said, well, we have to chant and placate these spirits in the right manner so bad things don't happen to us. And I'm looking around the jungle and I'm like, what bad can happen to you out here? They really don't have wild animals that attack them. They do have wild boar, and if you get them cornered, they can be nasty, same as a bird called a muruk, which is like an ostrich, or an emu maybe. And they're like, well, bad stuff happens to us. You know, our babies die in childbirth. If you can imagine, you are who have had children, squatting and dropping your baby on a banana leaf and then taking a sliver of bamboo and cutting the umbilical cord. You know, there's a lot of risk with that. Babies die in childbirth. Their houses are constructed of bush materials. They fall down. They get skin diseases. They die from a variety of things, leprosy, you name it, tuberculosis. And so they said the reason our ancestors said we have to placate these spirits in a specific manner is so this bad stuff doesn't happen to us. And I said, so do you know how to placate the spirits in the right manner? And they said no. So they live in this cycle of fear. They're driven by the bondage to fear. So as they are disclosing this information to us, they turned to me and they said, what do you do to placate the spirits of your dead ancestors? And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't do that. And they said, how do you escape the bondage of fear? And I got to tell them, I said, well, there was a message, there was this talk, and I'm in reference to God's word, but I couldn't say that. It would make no sense to him. But I said, there was this message that was passed down through the generations after generations, and that has come and it has liberated us from that darkness, and we do not live in fear. There are things I'm scared of, there's things I'm afraid of, but I don't live in bondage to fear. And they said, we want to know that message, and that was what we were wanting to hear. And they invited us to come so we could live among them, to learn their language. Okay. There, see, when I look at that and then point, I'm better. So we received an invitation. I put this picture here because this is our village head man. We would call him the tutu, or in English, he would be the head man of the tribe. That's 3 of his 6 wives there, okay? How would you like that? 6 wives, you know? Think about pleasing that. But, okay, I don't say that in an ill manner, but we decided we're going to move in among them, so we needed to build a home. When you build a home, you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, or you order your lumber and everything. All the lumber we needed to build our house was tied up in that tree. We just had to cut it down and unpack it. It was a 115-foot tall rosewood tree, 45 inches where we cut it there. We had a milling rig. Come on, David. Look at it. So we had a milling rig, and we slabbed timber with a chainsaw. We attached the milling rig onto the chainsaw, and then this is what, this is what it works. When I look at it and point at it, I guess I'm on target. So that's what our house looked out like. Actually built it out of rosewood, okay? And the government would only allow us to give the people the equivalent of $20 for that tree. I was at Hartsville, Ohio, not too long ago. There's a hardware store there at 6 square acres. If you want to be wild, go there. But they had an air conditioning room, probably the size of your auditorium, of exotic woods. And I went in there. They had Brazilian rosewood on sale for 1x5 for $21 a board foot. And I'm thinking, my word, we built 3 26 by 42 houses out of one tree and paid $20 for it. Although we did compensate the people with other trade goods. Then we're there, and it's like we need to build an airfield. So we took down about 3,300 trees, and we called the pilot and said, hey, we have an airfield. And he did a flyover, and he's like, you're going to have to take those stumps out. Our pilots are amazing, but they can't land on stumps. So we actually had a demolition guy from New Zealand come in and blew the stumps out with dynamite. You should have seen our people freak out about that. And then we had holes, so we set up a series of dams on some streams and eroded soil in there. We have a beautiful airfield. Okay, look, David. And that's our airstrip, as I had shown you earlier, and aviation is really a big part. I mean, imagine if you have to hike into an area, 77 hours plus of hiking to get there, and you get sick, how are you going to get out to get medical help? And even for us, because we did medical work, there were times we could not deal with things and would have to call in the airplane to have them sent out. So I'm going to put you on the airplane, just show you what it looks like landing there. So this is just coming in on our airfield. We have very skilled pilots. Typically, to get into this area, you had to get in there between sunup and 11 o'clock in the morning. We're in the rainforest with over 400 inches of rain a year, and it would sock in really quick. So aviation, it was our tool of getting into these areas to be able to advance the gospel among these people. If we'd have had to hike in and out and carry our supplies in there month by month, we'd have never got anything done. So we took the time to build the house, to build the airfield and make it accessible. So it was a great thing to have. Then you get into areas that look like this. A little hard to see it because my picture's quite dark. How are you going to get an airplane to an area there? We have people groups scattered all through these mountains up in the Finisterre. We just put another family there recently. So let me show you how we do that. Helicopter. So we got our first helicopter in 1987, and the second location where my wife and I worked among the loco people was a helicopter allocation for us. I hiked in, I put my wife and supplies on the helicopter because it was very costly in those days. We've now graduated to a lot better helicopters, are more efficient, and right now we're working on our third helicopter down in Arizona where our aviation school is to get that placed in Papua New Guinea. We've got about 600 missionaries on that field advancing the gospel among 170 people groups. So we are making a bit of a dent in there, but the helicopter was a wonderful thing, and just to have that has really helped us in our work. You know, to build an airfield takes about 18 months. So if you can have that 18 months to commit to your language acquisition, it's a wonderful thing. And that was the next step. We needed to learn the language of the people. Their languages have never been written down. They are oral speakers of the language. They never saw a pen. They've never seen paper. The first time I did a literacy class, I had 24 pencils. So I thought, I got 24 pencils, I'll get 24 students. Imagine teaching a 30-year-old man how to hold a pencil. He could hold a bow and arrow, and he had such strength in his fingers that when we handed out the pencils, they grabbed them and they broke them all in half. And now we had an enrollment of 48 students instead of 24. So it worked out really well for us, you know. But these unwritten languages, let me see if I can bring up my chart. So these are some of the characters for the sounds that we had. I have a letter circled there. It's actually the letter A. I'm going to put a word up. Okay. How do you pronounce that word? Can you see it? Let me hear you say it. How many said Papa? Did anyone say Papa? Okay. If you said Papa, you pronounce the first A as an ah and the second one as a You hear it? Papa, Papa, Papa. But it's Papa. Okay. Our language, fortunately, was phonetic. Okay. So in phonetics, like in English, we have A-E-I-O-U. Phonetically, that's A-E-O-U. Let's go to another one. This, if you said the sound, the second vowel differently, you use this symbol. We called it a pup tent. That represented that vowel. We had 18 vowels in that language there. That was a unique discovery. Half of them spoken through the mouth, half of them spoken through the nose. So you could have a word that was 36 characters long, and it might have 12 vowels in it. Half of them might be nasalized, half of them may be spoken through the mouth. But if you flip the nasalization around, then it means a whole different thing. So it was a very difficult language. And because part of it was spoken through the nose, if anyone had a cold, it sounded like everything was coming out of their nose. You know how we sound when we get a cold. So see if I can go to another one. So if I were to write the word put, I would write it P and then that little pup tent symbol for the word put. But remember I said phonetically, A-E-O-U? So if that U was a U, how would you say that word? Poot. Do we have any golfers? Any golfers? You don't go out on the green and poot, okay? You putt. It really, you know, messes with your mind. And most people say, oh man, I could never do that. But you know what? English is probably the most complicated. I wish I could come back and do a session on specific languages just to show you some strange things in our English language. I want to move on from here. I don't want to dwell on these because I do want to get to something else. Okay, that's another vowel. We won't go there. Okay, so the letter M is actually missing off of that. So you see the two little dots above some of those vowels? So we did that to represent your nostrils, okay, to know that you say that one through your nose. So that word is pronounced mahwe ta'ayue erien. Okay, really different, but once you get saturated in it, just like when you're a little kid, you learn English, it just rolls off your tongue. So it's not as complicated as you think. The worldview of our people, they are animistic in their worldview. Okay, they believe that spirits live in everything. You know, it's amazing. You know, the trees, the rocks, the moon, the stars, the lightning, everything has a spirit, and they have to placate it. When we actually stepped into our Bible teaching and we taught creation story, they were totally blown away. They said, man, our ancestors have lied to us. They told us that spirits live in these things. And here God created them all for our good and for us to benefit from. And we began to see a trickle of understanding creep into their heart. We laid a foundation based on the nature and character of God before we stepped into creation story. And then we worked our way. We teach the Bible chronologically from creation right up through the death, burial, and resurrection. And by doing that, we run the thread of redemption through all those stories. We don't mention Jesus at all in the Old Testament, but we carry the theme of the blood sacrifices. Remember when Adam and Eve sinned against God? They tried to cover themselves because of their nakedness. And what does God do? He steps into the picture and he provides a blood sacrifice that eventually points toward Jesus, the Lamb of God. It was kind of interesting when we told the story of Adam and Eve, how they sinned against God. During that time, some of our men got up and left the meeting. We said, where are you going? They said, well, Adam and Eve shouldn't have disobeyed God. God told them how they should live, and they rejected it, and they disobeyed God. So we're going home getting our bow and arrows, and we're going to go hunt them, and we're going to kill them. And we have to say, wait a minute, they lived a long time ago, okay? They were judged by God. But that was a signal to us that they were embracing truth, you know. When we got to the story of the Passover, and they heard how the Israelites had to put the blood over the doorpost to avert the death angel taking the firstborn, they were feeling the weight of sin so much that they came and they said, we don't have lambs, we don't have sheep, but we have pigs. We're going to go kill a pig and put the blood over the doorpost so God doesn't judge us. And we had to say, sit tight. We're going to get through the story, and you're going to see the provision that God has made. Or how about this? Do any of you feel you're equal to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah? I mean, we think we're pretty good people, don't we? But in God's estimation, we're no different than what they were. When we got to that story, our neighboring tribe, where we had co-workers, said those people got what they deserved. Our people, when they heard the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah, they said to us, they said, man, we're far more wicked than the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. What's God going to do to us? So again, we could see truth taking root in their hearts, and by the time we introduced Jesus as a baby in the manger, they were saying, he's going to be the promised one. He's going to be the Redeemer that saves us. Of course, they didn't know it was the death, burial, and resurrection. And that was a wonderful thing to be able to share. So the people are animistic in their worldview. They're driven by this fear-based thinking of manipulating spirits, lies, deceit, ancestral rituals. So all of that, as they were learning truth, they were questioning their relatives, their ancestors over and over again, saying, they lied to us, they deceived us. But then they realized their ancestors did not have this truth. So these people were really wrapping their head around truth and eventually embraced the gospel. Okay, ritual. This is a spirit house. These are some of the things that they would do to placate spirits, which they no longer do. I think I just turned myself off. Okay, so during the 5 years it took us to reduce the language to writing, we wanted to build relationship with the people. So we ran clinic. We did clinic with them every day, took care of them, built friendships. Sometimes we had to call the airplane in to have them taken out. We did community services. The pigs would get in and root their gardens, and we taught them how to make fences to protect their gardens. They never even thought of that before. We did some other community service type stuff. We gave them fresh water. They were drinking water out of streams with parasites, and they were getting ill. We taught them how to do hygiene. We built outhouses, or they built outhouses. We taught them how to do that. But we wanted to see their life expectancy expanded. When we got there, they only lived to be about 42 years of age. And through hygiene and clean water, we saw that life expectancy push out to about 52 years. Now, we did have people in their 70s that lived into their 70s and 80s, but on average, 52 years, and they were gone. Okay, literacy was another big thing. Again, as I said, teaching them how to. Why would we want to teach them literacy? Why would we want them to understand how to read and write in their own language? You have any idea? We're going to translate the Bible for them. And in translating the Bible, and being able to read and write, they could take notes and have fellowship. And once they learned to read and write, they just wanted us to give them information to read. So we translated stories of the Old Testament, and they loved it. One of the things I do want to say, I was going to go, I don't have time. I had a really neat little 10-minute video I would have shown you of how all this plays out among people. But our ultimate goal is not to fly airplanes. It's not to build houses. It is to bring the gospel to these people, to see them have an opportunity to embrace life in Jesus. And we got to do that, as I said, among two people groups ourselves. It was very enriching to do that. And as I said, if we were younger, we would definitely start this journey all over again, because there are people all around the world in need of Christ. But perhaps sometime I can come back during another EAA and I can show you the little 10-minute video. But we are blessed, really blessed, to have had this opportunity. You know,